Hey, Nate, I'm not sure how you want to run this or who's the chair of the committee. No, Joanne did the agenda item.
Dr. Rogers is the chair.
Dr. Rogers is the
Yeah.
chair. All right. There you go.
Well, I will admit I'm not prepared. So
All right.
so I am trying to track down the agenda. So Joanna, is it possible to resend that in the chat real quick? Or is it in the
Let me pull it up because I know Ebony sent it out. So if you give me a moment, I'll secure it. I have secured it and I will be putting it in the chat.
Thank you.
I'm working off of the laptop because I can't hear when I'm connected to the speakers. So I'm looking to see where the chat is in here.
Yeah, I'm doing a search in my inbox and I don't see an agenda. So I may have missed it somehow.
All right. I'm sorry, I'm not seeing the chat. And it might be because I'm just a participant. So I'll email it to everyone now. I just copied it from the from our website. Reactions. Oh. Thank you, Nate.
Well, you went, it was there and then you clicked on a different tab.
I can do a screen share because I have it up on my end.
Nyla,
Okay.
are you able to bring it up, Nyla?
Yes, give me just a second.
And I apologize to the fellow members. I will be prepared for the next meeting. So I know this is our initial kickoff meeting. I was not prepared to run the meeting. All right, well, let's start with roll call. So Ebony, are you going to do the roll call for this committee or someone else?
I am.
Okay, turn over to you for roll call.
Trustee Rogers,
Present.
Trustee Benavidez,
Here.
Trustee Shelton,
Here.
Trustee Wall,
Here.
and I believe we also have Trustee Dukowski on the line as well.
Present.
Okay, it's all yours, Chair Rogers.
Thank you. Do we have anyone sign up for public comment?
No, we don't.
All right, well, we will go to our first committee action is to accept the proposed agenda. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any questions before we call for the vote? All right, all those in favor of adopting the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. We will go to new business. And this is discussion and possible committee action to recommend the Board of Trustees on non-funded naming opportunities. So Joanne, I presume you're going to lead this discussion?
Yes, I'm happy to. Thank you so much, Chair Rogers. Regarding the naming, so as we know in the past, the naming for the Las Vegas Clark County Library District was that any naming opportunity would also be aligned with a 51% or more contribution to the cost of the program or the cost of the building or the cost of the room. In September of 2022, September 8th, I went before the board to request that be modified to remove that 51% requirement so that we would be able to secure more donors. And it was passed unanimously, or was passed. I can't recall if it was unanimously by the board. So we are working on a capital campaign and on working with donors for possible naming opportunities. And I have no paid donors for this or any donors at this point for this meeting, but we did want to talk about the non-funded donors. So we are following the NSHE model, and that was part of my presentation on September 8th. And following the NSHE model affords the opportunity for non-funded donors to have naming opportunities at NSHE and also down the line for the library district. If we start bringing on non-funded naming opportunities before we start securing funding for paid naming opportunities, I think it could be detrimental to our success in securing donors that would be contributing to have their name as part of a program or for their name on a building or for a meeting room. While I agree that the NSHE model is a great model, NSHE has been naming buildings and programs for 50 years. So if they have a non-funded naming from time to time, it's not detrimental to their base, to their funding base, because of all of the namings that they have. But since we're just starting off with this and we haven't had this in the past, my recommendation would be for any non-funded naming opportunities or non-funded honoring of certain community individuals, that it would be in the form of a plaque in the library where we can have a special recognition wall, because it doesn't take away from us as a development department to secure donors for namings if there's just a, like a bust or a nice plaque in the lobby. But if we start off before we secure funded namings, I think it could hinder our progress as we grow with this new policy. So those are my thoughts. I'm happy to answer any questions, Chair, or any question from anyone on the call.
Recognizing Trustee Benavides.
John, I actually agree with you. Just for a reminder, just to refresh my memory, can you kind of walk us through why we went from, because I do recall doing the funding part of it, but I don't remember why we went to the non-funding naming opportunities. Can you kind of walk us through that real quick?
Sure. So when I was working on this and putting this together, we were looking at the NSHE model because they are the master of namings when it comes to the state of Nevada with all of the institutions that they have. And there are comes time to time where they might have a longtime faculty member or someone in the community who has been a strong volunteer that has been associated with a naming at one of their institutions, whether it would be, the Mr. Smith meeting room, or there's no buildings at NSHE right now that are not donor funded. But we also want to have that opportunity because there are so many in the community that do so much for the library. And from time to time to recognize them for what they do when it's a non-donor funded recognition. I just think we stay away from the namings, at least for the first few years until we get this program up and running. Because if we start doing namings for rooms and parts of buildings that are not funded, and then I go and meet with donors and they'll say, well, what did the Smith family give? Because the donors generally ask that question, if they're curious on what other donors have done. And if we say that at this time, nothing, they could say, well, then maybe we'll just hold off. We're community leaders as well. Maybe we want our name on there for recognition. So we wanted to do that as a special caveat to this policy to be able to recognize those who are supportive of the library, but not to be the lead in the naming. And I hope I answered your question appropriately, Trustee Benavides.
You did. I just needed a refresher on that, but thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome, because it has been a while since we discussed this, so thank you.
I'm familiar with the NCHE practice, being an NCHE employee for 30 years. So for all of you who don't know it, that's Nevada System of Higher Education naming policy. So any other questions for Joanne?
I have a comment, Chair Rogers, regarding why. So Joanne kind of laid it out, the agenda item laid out from a development standpoint. And the reason that we're having this meeting is because of the process that we put in place, that names be presented to me, and then we include development and general services, and then we present names to the naming committee. And so we have received some requests for naming, one being to name a space at the Mesquite Library in honor of former trustee Raymaker. And then there was another request that I received from regarding recognizing in the future former Assemblyman Harvey Mumford at the future West Las Vegas library. And I think I got another one, Mr. Thomas Patton as well. So those three, I think I got all of them. Those three are requested spaces, one at Mesquite, one at Mount Charleston with Mr. Thomas Patton, and who was a resident in that community, and then that in the future, the recognition of former Assemblyman Harvey Mumford. So those requests came. So as part of those requests coming to me, we're bringing them forward to the naming committee to make some decisions regarding naming, and then to go to the full board as the process that we laid out when we presented the new naming committee process.
And Mr. Chair, and I was one who requested the naming for Mesquite, and I'm happy to speak on it. But that was my request, because I would like to, of course, honor Trustee Raymaker for her service and her leaving us too soon, but her contributions for the Mesquite community. And so that's why I brought that one to Director Watson.
Thank you, Trustee Wah. And I think, Joanne, what will be helpful to me is, and maybe Director Watson, to clarify for the I'm familiar with the naming thresholds, but are we establishing non-donor recognition thresholds in terms of how we would recognize them? I know the motion has a plaque, but is there a more comprehensive sort of recognition options there, or are we looking to just move forward with these such requests as plaques only?
And Trustee Rogers, Chair Rogers, thank you for that. My recommendation would be, since this program is so new, it would be to move forward with the plaques, because then you can honor that person in that library who has done so much for the community, but you're not taking away a naming opportunity from a prospective donor.
And what I would add is that with the non-funding naming opportunities, I would bring them to the naming committee to make that decision regarding the room, based on the information that we have, especially about Trustee Raymaker. So I didn't make any decision except for or any recommendation directly, except for working with Joanne, but to bring this to the committee and have it be a discussion point.
Okay. And then if I could just make sure I have my clarification. So are the three names that you previously walked us through, those recommendations would be for plaques at this time?
That's the staff's recommendation for plaques, yes.
Okay.
Chair?
Yes, go ahead, trustee.
Just a question. Do we have a criteria just so we can kind of make sure that we're doing this correctly? John, is there maybe a criteria that you may have or that you're planning on presenting to us of, what kind of items I don't know, like a resume they would have to present to us, just so that we can kind of have a working plan of how to move forward from today? I mean, I would hate to kind of, which I think these nominees are amazing. Two in particular, I don't know if I know the third gentleman, but I'd like to see like maybe a resume or something that more formally presented to us.
And Trustee Benavides, thank you for that. So those names that Executive Director Watson read off were names that were sent to him directly as the Executive Director of the Library District. He then asked me to research the policy. And what we have in the policy that was voted on is that, and I'll just read it now, this was for funded donors. But when it comes to the A, B, and C that I'll read, that can also be for the non-funded donors with the plaques. So the naming of a room, part of a building, library program, or public space within any of the LVCCLD locations shall be considered in accordance with the following principles. If named after a person or person, the following are to be a part of the consideration process. And I think that this is important for the non-funded donors, as Chair Trustee Waugh brought up when he was talking about Trustee Raymaker. So A would be quality and time of service to the state and local community, years of residency within the state or the community, substantial or significant donations to libraries, nonprofits, educational institutions, which are without a goal of personal gain. And those were, so when we're looking at non-funded, it would be 1 and 2. So quality of time and service to the state and local community, and years of residency in the state or community. And that also mirrors the NSHE policy. But when looking at the naming portion of it, we would definitely want to work with donors who are not looking for a personal gain. And most donors, like if you look at the donors, the many names on the buildings at the NSHE buildings, none of those individuals made the contribution for personal gain. They made the contribution because they believe in the mission of the university and the programming.
But as Trustee Benavides and all the trustees, we hadn't added that, but that's certainly something that we can add to have a resume presented either through the person who sent us the name, or we would have to do the research to do to put together a resume. But I think that's a good idea. I agree to have the resume so that you can make a informed decision based on the criteria that Joanne just laid out.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the third gentleman, Tom or Thomas? The name just doesn't seem to click for me.
And while Director Watson's looking for that, to answer your question, Trustee Benavides, so this name was given to me from Trustee Foyt via Chris Giuliani. Apparently this was a resident of Mount Charleston who passed away recently. And I know before COVID, I think they had looked at wanting to honor him some kind of way at the reading room. As far as his background, I don't know that, so I'll turn that back over to Kelvin. But just to give you an idea of where that name came from, apparently he's well known in the community up on Mount Charleston.
And I would
Thank
say,
you.
Trustee Chair, wow, you have much more information than I had. So I just have that he was recently passed away and that he was a tremendous library supporter / user of the library, but I have looked him up. And he attended UNLV and UCLA. He's a big supporter of Mount Charleston, built a website that hosted documentaries, which he contributed to. Just says he was a good neighbor, and I'm just reading from a quick search.
And then Trustee Waugh, Chair Waugh, this is Joanne. He passed in 2019.
Right.
I know Trustee Shelton had his hand raised, so.
No, I was just giving the thumbs up, Chairman Rogers.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think I agree with the process for recognizing those for non-donor recognition through a plaque process. I think I agree with Trustee Benavides. If we had sort of a process in place in which to receive those requests and make an informed decision, as you said, Director Watson, I think we would be comfortable with that direction moving forward.
Correct.
Were there any more questions? And then just to clarify, with the motion, if we approve the motion, does that mean those three names sort of move into this next phase, that they're going to be memorialized in the form of a plaque in those respective buildings? Or are we saying we're approving a process in which to do so, but then maybe come back with names and information?
You're recommending a process to the trustees to approve. And then once they approve the process, then you'll have it in to those specific individuals.
Yeah.
And so the next step actually is to go to the full board, Chair Rogers. So this was the committee has its process, and we're talking through it now. This is the first one, so we're getting that process. But ultimately, it's the full board based on the policy that would vote to move forward with whatever that is, naming a room or taking the recommendation from the committee to put a plaque in place.
And Joanna, have we got sample donor contracts? So when we do, we'll need two different ones if they approve this, one for plaques and one for actual funded name.
And I'll send something over to you this week, Terry, for your review. It's not finalized yet. Thank you.
And I want to so my hope is that when we meet in Mesquite is that we'll be able to, at the very least, and I explained this to Director Watson, is my preference is that when we meet in Mesquite is that we'll be able to, the full board will be able to approve some plaque for Trustee Raymaker. The other two individuals, there's time for that, but I just wanted to make sure that when we're in Mesquite that we're able to do that. And so my hope is with this item going to the full board is that we approve this policy, and then it's my intent to subsequent to that have an item just for Trustee Raymaker for a plaque for her, and then as far as the other two individuals, we can do that as a later time. But I just wanted to explain what my intent for the full board is with this item.
I'm not sure how that's going to work. They have to approve the process, then you have to do the process. So
as a committee of the board, can the full board do an action? I mean, because it's the full board doing it, I guess. I don't know.
I think I'd be more comfortable if you would do the process before you approve the process, and then they would ratify the actions taken by this committee in furtherance of that. I'd be obviously more comfortable if you'd wait, but I understand why you'd want to do it then. So if this committee would meet again and go through a resume process and or a recommendation, because staff hasn't even done their due diligence yet. I mean, I assume it's not going to take long, but I think you have to do the process, and we could probably do it before you formally approve it. So you recommend the process, they approve it, then you say, and in light of the process we're recommending, we've already done it, and our recommendation is to put a plaque up for Ms. Rainmaker. Then they can ratify that and go forward.
So I guess my ask, Mr. Chair, to you is if that is a process that the committee would be comfortable doing specifically for Trustee Raymaker before the April trustees meeting.
May I have a suggestion to give? What if, because I agree, I think we just have to make sure we do it correctly.
Right.
What if on the agenda of that Mesquite meeting, we would just put an item saying kind of this is what we're planning on doing, but not necessarily present it obviously by then, because we just wouldn't have the time to.
You can do that, Chair Y, depends on if that meets what you were trying to accomplish.
So you saying we alternatively for the April meeting in Mesquite, we could just have that as an agenda item to vote and approve the plaque.
I guess if this committee met again before that meeting, right, Jerry?
No, I think what she's suggesting is we have on the agenda that we approve the process, and then also an agenda item stating, and it is our intent to using this process to get a plaque for her. I think that's what Kelly was saying.
Correct. Just so that we have it on record saying that, she will be our first one once the discussion will be taken at that meeting. And then that will be like our announcement of, and she will be our first candidate or nominee.
So I'm looking to you, Chair Watt, to hear your thoughts on that alternative.
I saw Joanne raise her hand, so I'll.
Joanne?
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I do agree with Trustee Benavidez. I think since the meeting will be in Mesquite and having this process on the agenda and then making the statement during the meeting that she would be nominated for the first plaque, I think it just makes it really extra special because she was an extra special woman. And I think that's my personal opinion. And I know I don't have a vote, but I do agree with Trustee Benavidez on that.
And then Councilman Webb, could you just walk me through the steps one more time? So in this meeting, we would make the motion for creating this process, and then at the March full board meeting, we would vote to adopt that process. Is that correct? And then at the April meeting, we would probably still need to, well, we would not have to have another naming committee meeting before the April full board meeting, correct?
If we follow what Trustee Benavidez is suggesting, we would have
Correct.
an agenda item at the April meeting to approve the process. And
Yes.
then either as part of that discussion or as a separate item, we would tell the full board that, and the first person that is going to be nominated under this process is Ms. Rainmaker, and that we will do the due diligence, follow the process, and then the formal approval will be at the May meeting, authorizing the plaque going forward.
Okay. I mean, that resonates with me. So
I'd just like to also just get Trustee Dukowski's thoughts if you're comfortable with that, or if you had any thoughts, Trustee Dukowski.
Well, yes, I do have some thoughts. If there's any way to what we call fast track it in order to, not violate any rules, to be able to present her with a plaque, her husband with a plaque. The announcement, the meeting on the 13th, from what I understand, you are discussing, you're going to approve the process. You will be announced as the first one to receive this, and at a later date receive the plaque. Well, there needs to be some sort of, I guess, presentation later on, because to her husband or to the city or something to recognize her. It just seems like it's not very It seems a bit awkward, in fact.
No, I would definitely support, like, we would do a, you know, whether it was at a next meeting that we could schedule out at Mesquite, or do a special ceremony event for the naming process. No, definitely, I wouldn't just put it on the agenda. I wouldn't be in agreements to just, you know, put it on an agenda and agree to it, and then one day the plaque shows up. No, definitely some sort of like a ceremonial process of making sure that her family is present. And I know how valuable she was to the council as well, the Mesquite Council. So no, it would be, it's you know, fanfare, you know, honoring her for her work. I agree on that part.
Could
And
we,
The other way to do it is to just call a special meeting of the trustees. You know, a quick telephone, one item meeting to approve the process sometime in the next week or 10 days. Obviously, the due diligence isn't going to take long, and Kelvin could then report that back. And again, either the full board could give this committee the authority to approve the plaque, and then we could just have a quick meeting and approve it, and then give it to her at that meeting. That's another way to do it.
Trustees, we're already, for Mr. Raymaker, we've already presented, we're gonna have a plaque to present during the meeting for Trustee Raymaker's time and service as a trustee as well. So that's gonna happen. So we already have one plaque
Okay,
regarding, so I wanted to chime in and say that as we were continue having this conversation, to recognize her for her service, and certainly present that to her husband
all right.
during that meeting. Does that help, Trustee
Yes,
DeCosta?
Yes, it does, very much so. Thank you very much.
okay,
Mr.
so
Chair,
go ahead, Nathan.
I was just gonna, I guess, sum up kind of, I think, where we are is, so this committee will complete its process. Well, yeah, I like Trustee Benavidez's recommendation. So when we approve the process at the April meeting, we'll announce that Trustee Raymaker will be the first person to go through this process. And then, but at that meeting, we'll also be presenting the plaque to Mr. Raymaker, and then at a later date, we can do some sort of presentation, larger presentation with City Council, with any trustees who want to go up there, Director Watson and whomever, as well as Mr. Raymaker, to formally unveil the plaque for whatever space at Mesquite. Is that a good summation, Kelvin, Jerry?
I got it.
Good.
So we're good?
You'll need a motion to approve the recommendation to the board.
Okay, so now, yeah, I want to just make sure we're all good with the before we push the motion forward, so that we're good with the plan forward and the sequence. Okay, great. Do we have a motion to recommend committee action to the Board of Trustees is to propose plaques for non-donor recognition?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. All right. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Any opposed? All right. Motion carries.
Thank you, committee.
Okay. Now I think we're back to. All right. That concludes our new business. We will go to our next agenda item, which is public comment. Ebony, anyone sign up for public comment?
No.
All right. That said, we will go ahead to our final agenda item, which is adjournment. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. We are adjourned. Everyone, thank you for your time.
Thank you
Nate,
very
could
much.
you call me when? I'm sorry, Nate, could you call me when you have a minute?
Sounds good.
All right, everyone. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.